This leg we left Broome after we'd taken mate's truck out to out in the scrub for him, and then by the time we got back in from out there and we're getting to Wallea Bridge Roadhouse, which is the first stop away from Broome, heading back east again. We're on the home run now. So we camped at Wallea the first night and then into Derby, and it's a bit of time around Derby looking around there, and then out along the Gid River Road to Windjana Gorge, down to Tunnel Creek and over to Fitzroy Crossing, and finish up in Kununurra in about 3-4 days time, I think it is. We pulled out of the camp next morning about 9 o'clock and headed into Derby, but pretty good setup there. They got a big grassy area around behind the roadhouse. It didn't cost us anything. The drive-through sites, power. Only little drawback, a big heap of bindi birds out there when you deal with them. And somewhere during the night, or someone forgot to shut the gate, or the gate come open or something, and get up and there's a heap of cattle moseying around, feeding around on the grass there amongst the caravans. They didn't do any damage much, thank God, but yeah, could have been different. There's some pretty wild sort of cattle out in that country.
About 5 to 6 kilometres before you reach Derby, you will come across a turn-off into the iconic Boab Prison Tree and Myall Trough. The Boab Prison Tree is only a very short walk from the car park, and you'll find a fence all the way around it. And this is to try to stop some foot traffic close to the tree. The Boab Prison Tree, as it's known, is 1,500-year-old, and it's nearly 15 metres around the girth. And it's been reputed to have been used as in the late 1890s as a lock-up for the Aboriginal prisoners on their way to Derby for sentencing. But apparently there's no evidence that this was ever used to house prisoners. The groundwork for the building of this most iconic trust has its beginnings back in the early 1890s with the sinking of the Myall well. What we see here today is a significant reminder of the cattle droving history of Derby and the West Kimberley regions. Now, the original well, which is near the site, was known by the name of the man who sunk it, an Alfred Mayall. But after Mr. Mayall left the Kimberleys in the late 1890s, and the alternative name of Myall's Well came into use. But in 1910 or 1911, after the artesian drilling equipment came into use, the Public Works Department put down a bore near Mayall's Well. It was 322 metres deep, and it had a daily flow of 315.5 kilolitres, and it produced a billabong about 1.6 kilometres long. The trough was built in 1916-1917, and it is 120 metres long and is believed to be the longest trough in the Southern Hemisphere. The trough could handle 500 bullocks at a time without running dry. But the flow from the bore was falling off, and in 1919 it had only 40% of the original volume. But nowadays the water is pumped into the trough by the windmill that you can see here in the photo.
Derby itself is surrounded by mud flats in any direction, but one thing I did like about up this main street, I got this big row of bottle trees, big line all the way down. I've never seen so many bottle trees in one spot like that before. It looks pretty cool, actually.
This current steel and concrete jetty was built back in 1964, and it was replacing the old wooden T-shaped structure that was built way back in 1894. And it was linked to the town of Derby by a horse-drawn tramway.
and it crossed the mudflats via a causeway, and this is where the present-day road is located. Back then, wool and pearl shells were the major exports, but when the new jetty was built in 1964, it was live cattle that were exported, and fuel, oil and provisions were the main imports. Passenger ships did visit, and the last one visited here in 1973. The jetty is a popular place for fishing and mud crabs, and also to view the stunning sunsets over the King Sound. These tides here are also Australia's highest, with the tide variations can be as much as 11 metres, so they're huge.
The old Derby Jail is the only structure remaining from the police building program that began in 1896. It has remained almost intact due to the fact that it was constructed of iron bar work and concrete. The original timber frame police buildings, of course, was ravaged by termites and were demolished in 1977. The old jail was retained but remained under threat of demolition or relocation throughout the 1980s. But then in 1988, the National Trust classified the old Derby Jail, which highlighted to the community its value and significance in the history of Derby and in the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal relations. But in 1990, or by 1990, the roof had collapsed as a result of termites again, damaging the structure. Then in 1996, it was restored. The jail consisted of concrete floor and an iron frame, which was divided into two cells, and the dividing wall between the cells were lined with corrugated iron. The ceiling was mesh with a galvanised iron roof and supported by timber frames. There was a veranda surrounded three sides, and there were 14 ring bolts that you can see one in the photos today. They're original fixtures that were used to chain prisoners to the floor. The open cell was considered appropriate for the tropical weather up here. Also at Derby, you'll find the oldest cemetery in the Kimberleys. The official permission for the plot for the cemetery was given in 1887, and for a short time it was the only registered cemetery in the region. For 20 years, the cemetery was just neglected and was noted as being a real disgraceful state of affairs. So in the 1909 or thereabouts, they actually went and put a fence around it, and they included footpaths and subdivisions, and put iron grave numbers on it. But then in 1970, some bright spark sent a slasher in there to tidy up the cemetery. And of course, what happened? The slasher just scattered the grave numbers, making it impossible to identify many of those graves today.
After we'd had a look around Derby, we parked off out to along the Gibb River Road. My mate and Broom, we were going to do the whole Gibb. My mate and Broom said, no, don't do that, because you go out to the ranges out there, and once you get past that, it's you only see what you see on the bitumen, and the road's not really good. So he suggested that we go out from Derby, go out down Windjana Gorge through the Tunnel Creek, and come out down the bottom end at Fitzroy Crossing. So that's what we did. So we got to the campground there at Windjana Gorge and set up there, and had time to go and have a quick look around down the gorge. It's pretty awesome sort of a setup down that thing. it's right in the middle of nowhere, but these big high cliffs and the way, like that's sandstone coral reefs, or what do they call it, limestone, I think. There, so she's pretty spectacular. We looked around there that night, and then went off for a drive down to the Leopold Ranges.
Windjana Gorge National Park is situated 21 kilometres off the Gibb River Road. The gorge is 3.5 kilometres long, with 300-metre high walls that the Leonard River had forged this gorge through the limestones of the Napier Range. The river only flows during the wet season, but there is usually plenty of freshwater pools at the base of all the gorges, and of course plenty of freshwater crocodiles. There were 3 different walking trails that you could do, starting from 1 kilometre up to, I think, was a 7 kilometre round walk. The campground there, of course, run by the Parks and Wildlife, had unpowered sites, and it was suitable for caravans. Iminchi store is within the small Aboriginal community of Iminchi. It took us about 2.5 hours drive from the Windjana campground to the store, and that was a leisurely drive. The Aboriginal meaning for Iminchi is the place to sit down. It was first proposed as a community settlement area in the 1950s, and then in the 1960s, it developed the important stopover place and the roadhouse facilities alongside the Gibb River Road. The roadhouse closed down in March 2015, and we were there in end of May 2015, and it reopened again a year later in May 2016. Apparently the store was closed by, which is owned by the Aboriginal community, was closed by them because they were locked in conflict with whoever was contracted to run the shop over some lease conditions.
Gibb River Road's a destination on its own right, really. It's you could spend months up there wandering around through all the waterfalls and all the back tracks and all the stuff that's up in there, but it's pretty rugged country. It was 660 k's long, and from Derby to Kununurra, and it was built in 1949. They started it for a beef road as part of the Australian Beef Road project. After the war, they had opened up a lot of this back country. It was just rough tracks, just knocked through with the dozer, and then the grader following them. So we started in 1949 and then actually finished in 1956, and it cost £13,677 to build it. But it was still a pretty rough road, pretty wild track from all accounts. Like most of them things, they were just knocked through originally, and can't find the information. I would look for the information on it, but I couldn't find it. But I seen it somewhere once before that a bloke went through with a D7 dozer and a grader following him, and they just blazed the track from here to there, straight across the paddock, and that was the road for a long time. And then 96, I think they said that main roads, Western Australia actually upgraded it a bit.
Actually come from a fair way if our mates were chasing that helicopter. A fair way back there.
Video job.
Yeah, I got the video going. Watch out. Rock State.
One of them little bobbers on the back leg fridge.
Oh, I like this little fella. Look at his colour bib. Sounds trying to look in here. It's this little fella here, Mum. It's a nice little car, but this little fella here. There you go.
It's a dirt road, and it's got bits corrugation on it, but they've got graders working on it, especially in the tourist season. But what you don't expect on some of these bush roads, I've driven a lot of these backcountry every day, and you got the foreign tourists there, and then V8 rented Land Cruisers and 79 series cruisers, and mate, they just fly through there, and you'll have one go past you, and then a couple of seconds later be another one in the dust, and that's just not how Aussies drive. You just don't drive in the dust like that. And you pull up at the side of the road, it's like being in the traffic on the highway. You've got to make sure there's nobody coming behind you, because they just float around you. And then when we pulled up at Home Valley Station, we flew in there for a look from Kununurra, and the woman there was telling us that they had to go to town to get more tyres, because there were just people doing tyres, these little curly bits of metal in their tyres, and they didn't know where they come from. And I said, well, I know exactly where they come from. That's peels off the grader blades. You know how you get those old butter knives and you scrape the butter and it curls, and you grade at that hard, rocky, gravelly country, that'll do the same thing, your grader blade, and this takes these little slithers off. We had road trains working at Yarrabee Cart and Coal, and we had a full-time grader on there, and we're forever digging these things out, and they're like porcupine quills. Once they get in the tyre, and then they just work their way all the way through. So I think they said they had 4 graders working on it, but that was the tyre issue. The road wasn't too bad because of the graders, but then they're picking up the metal off the blades. But yeah, it's a destination in its own right, so we didn't do the full thing this time. We've got other places to go, but I'll probably go back there one day and do that, and Buntine Highway, and that Noel Buntine from Catherine. He's one of the big main cattle carters up there, and he developed his own roads to get into some of these stations. So yeah, they're sort of just rough out back roads, but that's my sort of country.
As you leave the Windjana Gorge camp areas, heading towards Tunnel Creek and Fitzroy Crossing, you come across some ruins, which is still within the Windjana Gorge National Park. Now, these ruins is the Lily Malua Station ruins. Now, it was a homestead that was constructed from the local limestone in 1884 for the King Sound Pastoral Company. But in 1893, it became a police outpost. and the site is known as the Lily Malua Police Station ruins. All that is left today standing is parts of the sandstone walls of the building. When you're travelling from Windjana Gorge National Park to Tunnel Creek National Park, you're travelling on the Leopold Downs Road, which connects the Great Northern Highway with the Gibb River Road. Tunnel Creek National Park is within the Napier Range, and this is the same range that can be seen at the Windjana Gorge. The main feature of the park is, of course, the tunnel, which the creek has worn through the Napier Range, and the tunnel is about 750 metres long, and it is the oldest cave system in Western Australia. Tunnel Creek became famous in the late 1800s when an Aboriginal leader and outlaw, Jandamara, or better known as Pigeon, was using the Tunnel Creek as his hideout. And after years of playing hide and seek with the police, he ended up being killed in front of it by another Aboriginal tracker in 1897. The drive from Tunnel Creek to the Great Northern Highway took us only 40 minutes. The road is a good form road, but it's subject to really bad corrugations, and it was especially at the bottom end of the road, close to the Great Northern Highway. It was really rough. There were several floodways, and a couple of them had small amounts of water in the bottom of the crossing, but Spring Creek crossing is the deepest water crossing. It does have a gravel bottom. The water was about halfway up our wheels, so it would pay to check the depth, and if your vehicle can't handle much depth of water, then probably don't go that way. So we're back on bitumen again, yay, and we're heading for Fitzroy Crossing, which is going to be our next camp spot for the next couple of days.
Where are we going next?
I don't know. That way?